Hello, and welcome to Beyond the Noise, the podcast series from PRWeek. I'm John Harrington, editor of PRWeek UK. I'm joined today by PRWeek senior reporter Edie Barrett and our very special guest, Jordan Schwarzenberger, manager of the spectacularly successful social media collective, the Sidemen. Welcome, Jordan. Thanks for joining us. How are you today?
Very well, thank you, guys. Thank you for having me. Should be a lot of fun.
Pleasure. So, for those who don't know, for more than a decade, the Sidemen have been enthralling people with their fun, entertaining videos centered largely on quirky challenges. The YouTube stats speak for themselves, with 6.4 billion views and nearly 22 million subscribers from almost 400 videos. They even had a Christmas number one single. Sidemen have their own branded products too, which we'll discuss later. So it's great to have Jordan on to discuss the Sidemen's story and get his reflections on influencer marketing, brand promotions, social media, and more. Interestingly, this week it was announced that Jordan himself had joined Grayling, the PR agency, in a new media relations advisory board. So hopefully we'll touch on that too. So let's start at the beginning. Jordan, how did you start working with the Sidemen initially, and what does your role kind of typically involve now?
So we started working with the guys in 2021. So myself, two other co-founders, Sam and Aaron. Sam has basically been their accountant since 2013, 14, since they started. And even when they were doing stuff individually, he always has a story of one of the first gaming conventions, and the guys made all this money from all the merch they sold when they were just absolutely, obviously, flying in the kind of convention world at the time when YouTube was really in its sort of first big lift. And they just had this briefcase of money that he had to then take to his accountancy firm and just try and work out how the heck do you even manage that, right? I mean, this was YouTube in its kind of sort of infancy, if you will, but when it boomed massively in its case. He's looked after them for a long time. Myself and Aaron worked with each other at YMU. So I was the chief creative officer at YMU, which is the biggest sort of talent management company in the UK and Europe, I think. And Aaron had worked on the accountancy side of that business as well. So he'd met Sam. We then came together as a three and started talking and was like, wow, actually there's a massive opportunity here for the Sidemen to do something more and actually to be properly managed, because they had sort of representation, which in the UK, especially in the influencer space, is quite archaic. It's all non-exclusive representation between competing parties and often factions, and it becomes a little bit bloody and not very nice. And what that does is it creates a lot of confusion in the market from a brand perspective, but also it means that everyone's out there sort of chasing brand deals. No one's really building your business and your brand for you, right? And I think over in America, we'd had a couple of signs that the movement was towards creators elevating their businesses, building more above and beyond them as kind of content creators as such, and leveraging the distribution for more. Obviously, off the back of more traditional celebrities, people like your Kylie Jenners and Kylie Cosmetics and Emma Chamberlains and others who had sort of started the journey, if you will, of sort of building out beyond their channels and their fame. Ryan Reynolds, obviously another amazing example, who just seems to keep going on that front. And so how do you take that same model and apply it to talent here and apply it to the biggest creators? So yeah, we spoke to the guys. They were like, yeah, let's do it. And we sort of presented to them a strategy and a plan which they'd never had before, a deck of where are you going. This is the thing that I've been doing at YMU all this time, was building strategy and sort of vision, if you will, for clients and helping to execute. So we presented that to them. They were like, yeah, let's do it. And then we started Arcade as a vehicle to manage them and to manage them exclusively. So yeah, we only manage the guys. We don't have any other talent that we represent or manage, because we considered it at the beginning and then realized actually there's no one else we would like to manage, but also having that sort of direct focus and trust both ways in that sense cuts out the sort of the race to transactional money and income and brand deals, which is often the move for managers. So you end up then having a lot of focus and you can build for the long term. So because we only manage the guys, we've been able to be super focused, and that's led to a much greater degree, I think, of trust, but also of energy directed in one place, which is dig as deeply as you can and build as much as you can for them, rather than trying to spread across hundreds of clients, tens of clients. This was the big challenge that we had at YMU, where we had 1,000 clients, however many people across the business. And the problem is you can't really do much in the way of meaningful work for people because you just have too many. So let's go the complete other way and just have one. And so far it's worked out really well.
And as you touched upon there, Sidemen has really gone from a group of friends to an entire brand in itself. When did the first commercial element appear?
Yeah, I mean, I think for the guys before my time, right, obviously Sam was really there from the beginning of their commercial start, and as both as individuals and then all as individuals, and then when the groups sort of formed in 2013 with their own channel more formally. But the commercial element began really with, I mean, as you do with YouTubers, right? You start with AdSense. So once YouTube kicked in its AdSense program properly, you start making some meaningful money from the platform. And obviously then as the audience grew, income grows, and you start to build out an actual business off the back of making videos, paired with merch. And those are the sort of two original, if you will, revenue streams for creators. There wasn't really much else. There wasn't much in the way of direct monetization. There wasn't really anything else in the way of venture building, if you will. But yeah, the first sort of, as I was saying about the convention, the big sort of YouTuber conventions over here, the money you can make from merch was massive when merch was a bigger thing than it probably is today. But then also, yeah, as the audience grows and AdSense grows, you start to make a living out of it. So yeah, I think that probably happened quite early for them. Both, I think it was probably around 2010 to 13, that sort of period. And then 2013 when they started making more videos collaboratively. And then from then to then when the channel was formed, I think in 2018-19 together, the main channel, it just went from strength to strength. And yeah, since then it's been about how do you build much bigger and above and beyond that, and try and build brands and businesses that can, in theory, become bigger than the Sidemen itself. That's the aim.
Yeah. So when it comes to brand deals, how do Sidemen decide which brands to work with and how to work with them?
Increasingly, we're trying to do more and more creative stuff with brands. I think the brand world in influence has always been a bit archaic and not great. I don't think it's quite transactional, quite basic, like just integrations or shout outs. I think there's a big opportunity actually to sort of build more premium creativity into the world of YouTube advertising and inventory. Obviously, there's a ton of money being spent on YouTube currently. I think it overtook TV in the first quarter of this year for ad spend, which is huge and shows the direction of travel for brands that are sort of from an auction or programmatic level. But where it gets really interesting, I think, for us is how do you bring in slightly more elevated creativity into the inventory that we've got. So you're making actual ads. That's kind of a new frontier that we're going on at the minute, where we want to start building out more TVC level work for brands that then gets distributed and sort of activated across the incredible inventory that the Sidemen have with them in it. So applying models from those who are doing it at a much higher level, someone like Ryan Reynolds and Maximum Effort are killing it. And I think bringing amazing creativity in, paired with Ryan Reynolds, paired with his distribution to help amplify, it's like the perfect combination. So looking at that literally as we speak right now, I think historically the way the Sidemen have worked with brands has just been quite traditional in the YouTube world, which is integrations on YouTube, so 60-second or 90-second almost read, if you will, of an ad script. Basically, is the way it's typically been done. A few more creative partnerships, things like the Revolut partnership we did, which was a 9-month deal with them, where we created our own card and actually built out bespoke discounts and rewards. And I think it was the most successful acquisition partnership they'd ever done, and it went down really well. I think over 100,000 downloads of the app for them, which is massive, right? And the conversion can be done well if there's more creativity attached, which is the thinking from our side. To be honest, the guys don't do that much with brands, because most brands, there's been a race to the bottom in a way in terms of fees, in terms of asks, because there's just such saturation of talent out there, which means that it's not always worked for the guys, and that brands often want more and more for less and less. How does that work when you've got 8 of them? It's difficult, but increasingly I think we want to do a lot more and actually find more creative ways. If we're going to do it, I think always for me with a brand and a talent, obviously putting aside, I guess, just the pure like commercial interest of money, but if it can make you money and push your brand forward, that's always the best thing. And strategically it has to do both in my mind, ideally, or you don't do it. That's kind of the rule for me. So yeah, more of that and more creativity I think coming into the way we work with brands is the aim going forward.
Sure. So what advice would you give to brands as a result of that, in terms of do's and don'ts when it comes to sort of approaching influencers and working with them?
Totally. So I think, look, I think on a smaller level, when it's let's say short form creators or talent that are sort of on a much smaller level, obviously the asks can be higher. There's more flexibility maybe from the brand side. They have a bit more leverage and control. Doesn't mean they always exercise that in the right way. I think the best way to work with creators is to work with them and not just, I see some horrific, I did a talk on this actually. I was on a panel at MadFest recently talking about this whole very thing around like the terrible state of influencer briefing that exists amongst brands. Some of the ones that I've seen through that process of the panel were just horrific, and it's like, of course you're not going to get any good results. I think a lot of brands, because of their own fear, look, so most brands exist in a fear mode of, I don't want to shake the boat, I don't want to do anything disruptive, I don't really want to challenge the calm waters of the brand process internally, and obviously they're wrestling with CMOs and often hierarchies. They don't want to get fired, they don't want to get in any trouble. So there's a sort of a overbearing, I find, approach to creators where they want to control every element more often than not, whereas the brands that are able to have a bit more flexibility and hand more over often do better. And we've seen that in our case as well, right? When there's more creativity handed over, better results do come. I think that is generally the rule. The more prescriptive, often the less you'll end up getting good results. Often creators as well, right? Creators are creative people. Creative people often aren't necessarily, this is a big generalization, but aren't necessarily the most analytical. They're not going to read through necessarily a whole brief and understand your brand objectives and aims. They might not care. But ultimately, for me, it's one key thing you want them to do. Just have one simple key message. And that's the job of a brand, to spend time distilling to like one thing. Like go for us, for example, with our brand Best, our cereal brand, we did a whole campaign with creators and we just said, go to Tesco and buy it. That's it. Whatever you want to do, we don't really care. Like, you know your audience best. You know how to execute that in the best way. Just go to Tesco's and buy the cereal. That's what we wanted to get across. So I think brands should just aim for simplicity and creative freedom for the talent. Otherwise, don't bother working with them. Do it yourself if you want to control every element. And don't produce any more than a one-page brief. And on that one-page brief, have one thing that you want them to do, please. Because everyone will benefit from that. And obviously things like amends and the process of then brands being unhappy because they've sent a 20-page document over and the talent missed the slide 5 where they said don't wear red or something. And it's like, okay, what is this? And I think it just doesn't work for anyone. So simplicity, creative freedom for the talent, and trust that the people you're working with, you're buying into their vision and their execution. Otherwise, do it on your own channels for yourself.
It's brilliant advice. It's funny, isn't it? It feels like this kind of world of influencer marketing isn't exactly brand new. It's probably been going on for, 10, maybe at a stretch, 15 years, the very early days. And yet still, it feels like turning around an oil tanker sometimes when it comes to brands understanding this new world. Are you kind of surprised that it maybe hasn't shifted in recent years?
Am I surprised? Not overly, because brands move, as you say, at the pace of snails because of all of their challenges internally often, right? And generally the corporate world and the realities of that on the ground are very different to delivering on great creativity, which is why most brands don't deliver on great creativity and they don't work with people in the best way. That's just always how it has been and always will be. I think it's just the way it is. So I'm not overly surprised that it hasn't progressed that much. I think it's just, as ever, right? There are the brands that will do the same thing and chug along, and they're the brands that will disrupt and do things very differently, and they're the ones who will win today. So I just think it's an opportunity for anyone who really wants to execute with creators. If you just do what often the big guys don't do, because they often can't because of their challenging corporate, I guess, chains, if you will, internally, then you can have massive success. So I think it's more like massive opportunity for those who want to be a bit brave and do things slightly differently. But am I surprised, and do I think it will change? No, because brands will always seek control and always seek to be overbearing and annoying, because that's what keeps people in their jobs. That's fundamentally the biggest fear everyone has, is no one wants to get fired. So yeah, it's just knowing that reality and then being able to, if you can, give people in your teams more freedom to take risk and be more brave in the way that they outsource creativity, and actually outsource it. Don't try and stranglehold people as you hope that they deliver the goods. They won't.
Yeah, interesting. And now, in a sort of funny way, the Sidemen have kind of turned the tables because they are themselves the brand, and they own, as you mentioned, Best cereal brand. There's several others as well. Sides. I mean, do you kind of do walk the walk when it comes to this sort of thing as well? When the Sidemen are kind of doing work with other influencers when it comes to promoting their own brands, is creative freedom very much at the forefront of that approach?
Totally. I think what's immensely beneficial about being a creator owned and fronted brand, right, across all the things we do, is that we really understand on the ground, as people who are making content ourselves, as people who have, first-hand knowledge of what creators want, don't want. Like, we work with the guys every day, we work with other talent all the time, right, in terms of executing things and content, etc. Like, we're in and around the world of creators at the very, very forefront. We know exactly how you get the best outcome because we see it on the other side. So it really helps. And yeah, we've found across all of our brands, all the executions and different things we do, I think it's been successful so far because it's always been done with all of that in mind, that actually you need to lean in, you need to give talent freedom to do what they do best. Otherwise, don't bother going to them, right? That's always just should be on the wall of every brand. Just like you're going to them for a reason. Just go to them and let them do what they do best. And Best has been a good example of that. There's been a number of different activations and things we've done with the brand that have lent into that mindset. Same with Sides. There's a number of formats and shows that we've created actually for Sides with talent that again have been all about that kind of outsource creativity, as well as the gifting program we have with Side. Same thing, like not being prescriptive, just getting people to come and enjoy it, and making sure that the product we have and what we're delivering is so good that they'll of course talk about it and they'll love it, but it's not, again, being prescriptive. And that goes for everything we do, really. I think it really helps. Having that creator first mindset as a brand will change everything in the way that you operate, I think.
Thought we could look a bit at the variety of social platforms out there, because obviously the Sidemen started on YouTube and that's still their priority. But there are a lot of other channels out there which I'm sure you have to take into consideration too. So I wondered which sort of social platforms you think are most important to the Sidemen, and if there are any which are less of a focus.
And for anyone, really, it's around where are your audience actively engaging with what you're doing, right? YouTube obviously is a massive one and will forever be really the core of the Sidemen world. It's long form. It's the home for really where young people go to sit and watch content for hours on end online, right? Like it is just the home for that longer viewing, and that's where the Sidemen obviously excel is now, especially on the main channel. It's an hour and a half, 2 hours content. Sometimes it can get to that length. So, and the watch time's incredible because that's where people are going for that reason. They know what they're getting. So I think YouTube will forever be the home. And also from a commercial perspective, obviously AdSense, it pays the bills. It creates a commercial environment whereby the guys can actually fund their content and keep it moving in a way that if you're only on other platforms, you can't necessarily do. Instagram obviously is important. I think increasingly less so, just because I think Instagram's not as relevant as it was. They're trying, obviously, but they're just not quite there anymore in the same way. TikTok, massively important. I think more so really for the Sidemen than one may think, especially we saw it with our recent show Inside, which was the guys' version of Big Brother, essentially their reality show, first time doing reality on YouTube for them, and it did amazingly well. I think it's on 60 million views now, hit 40 million in the first week of watching. Incredible numbers, and dwarfed many big reality shows in the UK with some of the numbers just on YouTube alone. And actually so much of that I think was driven by TikTok and people finding it on TikTok. We had a very robust TikTok strategy, and part of that was around having a clipping strategy that was super dispersed and being able to get as much volume onto the platform as possible, as quickly as we could, as early as we could, so it could pick up. And it worked really well, to the point where I think a lot of traffic would have been people finding it on TikTok, seeing it constantly on their feeds, then being intrigued, then heading over to YouTube. And I think that's because a lot of younger people, as we know, like TikTok is really the home, the second home, if you will, or the short form home of young audiences consumption at the moment, to such a big extent. Obviously anyone with kids of a certain age will know that. Anyone just looking at the numbers will see that very clearly. TikTok is massively important, and I think the effect of TikTok in terms of becoming this sort of cultural drumbeat, where like the more you see something repeatedly turning up, the more you sort of see it being validated and seeing it as something that's trending, and it creates this effect whereby you want to go and find it, you want to go and be up to date with it, right? And a lot of people will just go to TikTok as their source of news, as their source of sort of cultural entertainment, and longer form things they'll just consume on TikTok now, right? Like that is the way that things are moving. So yeah, TikTok and YouTube I would say are the two most important, and yeah, I think that will continue for a long time, is my sense.
Any sort of particular views on X these days?
I think for the Sidemen audience and for the YouTube audience, it's relatively important. I think it's still quite key for the culture and the space. But do I think it drives massive numbers? Not really. It's just a space where the biggest creators and a lot of the sort of core fan base do live and do operate, and I don't think that will change necessarily. But do I think it's as relevant as Instagram is? Like, no way. But I still think it does have a place.
So an interesting thing I wanted to pick up on, Side Plus, so Sidemen subscription tier. I thought that was very interesting, an unusual step probably for the kind of influencer creator community. It'd be good to talk a bit about the reasons for having Side Plus and how it's fared.
Yeah, I mean, Side Plus is the tentpole, if you will, of taking control of both audience and commercial, ultimately, relationship, right, with that audience. It's a direct-to-consumer channel for the guys, and it's been built around this concept of, for those who want more, they can access more and pay for more to support that. And it's been immensely successful. It's created this great community of Side Plus fans, and, the content volume on there is huge. The guys are putting out, a podcast, behind the scenes show, multiple other formats and sort of specials. And yeah, it's been incredibly well received. We've had weddings through Side Plus. We've had all sorts of stuff happen as a result of the platform, because I think for fan bases, having spaces which are for the core mega fans, if you will, people who are really just heart and soul into the brand, those having a space which provides that option is, I think, hugely valuable and just creates that closed walled garden, if you will, especially when you've got big kind of global platforms like YouTube where, everyone's in the comment section, everyone's engaging with it. It can feel like, yes, okay, everyone can access it, but it also loses maybe a sense of it being special. Whereas if it's in a closed community, it feels a lot more intimate and close. And that's exactly what Side Plus has done. It's created this amazing effect of, I think, investment and engagement amongst that core fan base, but also it's provided an outlet and a funding mechanism for the guys to be more experimental with the content that they're making, to do things that wouldn't work on YouTube, to have those regular sessions where they're coming to the studio, seeing each other every week, and being able to produce content that is just different and has different tempo and rhythm, etc. It's even more meditative, I think, than YouTube is, right? People really sit down on Side Plus and they can watch a 2.5 hour BTS following a Sidemen Sunday that they've watched on YouTube. So yeah, it's slower, it's a lot more intimate. You'll see people will just have it as part of their watching habit when they're eating dinner and they'll just have their phone on the side and they'll be listening to Sidecast or watching Sidecast and then onto BTS and onto, one of the specials, etc. So it works amazingly well. People love it. It's been going now nearly 3 years, 3 years in September, which is huge. I'm excited to see where it goes and how it develops as the guys get older, as the content they want to do changes, as well as they start wanting to test more formats and ideas. Side Plus becomes the home for that, and really is that membership club more than it's just a subscription content platform. It really is kind of more. And we've seen that, like, you go to the charity matches or go to events, right, and like people are in their Side Plus t-shirts. They're really representing that core fan base, which is, again, amazing to see. So yeah, I love it. Very glad that the guys did it, and I think they enjoy it a lot, and the fan base have received it really well. So
seems like a great way to build community. We wanted to touch next briefly on AI, obviously a huge topic in the last year or so. It seems like recently it's really kind of infiltrated the creator market, things like AI enhanced content and even AI generated creators. Wanted to get kind of your general thoughts on that sort of trend and where you think that might be going, and even if the Sidemen are using AI in any way in any of their kind of strategy.
maybe I'm old. Am I old? I don't know. I'm 27. I wouldn't quite
Don't
say
say
I'm
that.
old. I feel old. I feel like I don't care about AI, and it's really bad, but I just don't really care that much about it. I think the human connection of content will not be replaced by computers, however much one may think that it's possible for it to. I think it can be, of course, enhanced. There's very specific applications that seem to, in our real world, actually being used, because there are lots of tools out there now. There's many funded startups, there's many options, but people are only using a little slither. Like, maybe they're using Chat GPT as, let's say, like an enhanced Google for them, or it's helping them with whatever it might be, like very specific applications. You think tools like Descript and others in our world are super useful, right? Like to be able to transcribe quickly or clip quickly, cool. But you still have to, it takes it to 65-70%. You still have to add that personal touch. You still have to make sure that it's correct, etc. And I think all of the hype and all of the noise felt like, to me, a VC and financing bubble that needed to be pumped and needed to make everyone feel like this is the biggest thing in the world. And actually, if we don't just all like scramble to either fund these companies or to get behind these companies, then we're all going to basically lose our jobs and our lives. I just don't believe that. I don't think it's true. And especially in the world of creativity and personality driven content, an AI influencer is not going to, no one will really care. No one's going to develop a relationship, I don't think. Even if you look at some of the good examples out there of sort of virtual influencers who, are interesting and they're novelty and they make money maybe, but they're not going to replace real people. I just don't see it happening. And the imperfect nature of people is the charm of why people love creators and why people love talent and personalities, and why personalities will forever shine. So yeah, I think in our world, in terms of the bigger question of will AI influencers or virtual, like, will that replace real people, I just think flat out no. Do I think that there's application for tools? Of course, like, and it will accelerate great people to do things better, quicker, more effectively, for sure. And people in our teams, I'm sure I don't even know, but for thumbnails or for like very specific applications, yes, of course, being able to take mass samples and mass databases and be able to leverage that information to provide better outputs, absolutely, that will be needed and that will be used. But do I think it will shake the ground where we're on? No, I just don't believe it. And I think time has already shown, even the projections of how things, even like just generative AI generally, right, like how that will change everything. It's like, it hasn't. It's just, everyone's being honest, it hasn't. And I think we should just be comfortable with that and stop, I think, trying to find the next bubble, which is what I genuinely felt it was. I think it was a finite, they needed something fresh to make money on. And then everyone had scrambled to fund all of these companies at such a high level, scrambled to get in the, and there was some big exits made along the way. But has it really materialized in our daily lives? I don't think so. They said it would by now. I don't know. Maybe that's just me.
Yeah, well, fascinating views. Moving on to something else, and last year, the Sidemen member KSI received a lot of criticism for saying a racist slur on a Sidemen video. He later apologised. This must have been a very difficult time for everyone involved. How did you find this experience, and what would you say have been your biggest lessons from it? And do you sort of have a kind of, I guess you could call it a crisis communications plan if things do happen that are unexpected and bad like that?
Totally. I mean, look, I remember it was on a Sunday, obviously, because it's always on Sunday. We woke up on Monday just like, wait, hang on. Like, that was not good. And yeah, I mean, it was a very intense week of focused thinking and strategic planning and genuine internal shifting and changing. And I think there are so many things about that we spoke about at the time, and we made sure that we were following. And it's maybe the benefit of coming out of somewhere like YMU, right, where we'd been through crises. I'd understood the world of crisis management myself, and had managed to navigate a few of those situations on a smaller level, maybe, but also seeing from afar things like when Ant and Dec had their crisis in 2000 and what would have been 1918 when Ant crashed his car, and seeing a lot of these examples at a very high level, you get an understanding of how to navigate, and also some people to help you, right? And I think that was one of the biggest things from a purely, and this is not to kind of talk about, I guess, the actual slur itself or the incident itself necessarily, or my views on that, because that's kind of been covered, but more about the response and how you deal with it. And I think the most important thing is to just hold your hands up when there's a mistake, and when the mistake is, especially at a corporate institutional level, you hold your hands up, you take accountability, you apologize, and you don't, I think personally, the strategy should be apologizing authentically, implementing change, having a statement that represents that, not in any tokenistic or fake way, but just being real about things you've done and how you as a company, through in various ways, whether it's primary or secondary view, And in our case, the challenge for us was a diverse editing team around the world don't pick up on nuance. So something that is offensive in England isn't necessarily offensive in Germany, and actually having a team that is, ironically in a way, right, from around the world can also lead to different challenges of nuance that mean you need extra protections in place. So things like that had to then come in as a result, and they were slips from our side institutionally. Of course, JJ was very apologetic and held his hands up, and was clear about his stance on his mistake, right? And I think everyone learned a ton from that. So very grateful that these situations happen always. That's my mindset with these things. Whether things go wrong, actually when things go wrong, you learn the most often, right? And this was one of those examples. In terms of dealing with it, yeah, it had to be dealt with in a very calculated and strategic manner, and that meant being calm and composed. For anyone dealing with any crisis, obviously the main thing is, why is there a crisis? Because you made a mistake. So hold your hand up and take accountability, own it, and lean into that truth that you messed up if you did. And I think then it's about being measured and not feeding the flames. I think one thing that comes off the back of social media is when there's a mistake made, because people will make mistakes, and that's the reality, as I said, right? AI can't make mistakes. AI will not have a crisis management thing, and that's part of the problem in a way, right? Because people are flawed, they're imperfect, that happens, that's life. And I think it's about owning it. It's about having a cool, composed response, which is singular, not repeating yourself 100 times, not adding fuel to the fire, not almost inciting more. Because people then on social, right, they want to make sure, they want to kind of, a lot of people anyway, some people, whenever there's a crisis, will then always try and provoke more response, and they want to feed the beast, if you will, and you don't want to feed the beast back. So I think it's being, again, authentic, like holding your hands up. The most important thing is just apologizing and taking accountability for what you've done. Things will shift over time, and I think it's important to just take a minute and do the right thing and not be reactionary. I think that's really important. If you're reactionary often, I think you can make things a lot worse than they are.
Yeah, it strikes me actually that big corporations can maybe learn a few things from the likes of the sort of influencer YouTube community, because being an influencer, going back to its basics, and it's a word you use and a lot of people use, is about authenticity, being authentic. And actually, I think it almost, that idea fits a lot more comfortably when it comes to things like making apologies, like holding your hands up. Whereas big corporations, it almost seems like they can get a bit lost in the weeds when it comes to simply giving a human response.
Totally agree. I think, yeah, absolutely. Big corporations need to be more human, and that's the fundamental thing. Humans are flawed and imperfect, and therefore will make mistakes. And companies are just collections of humans. But when companies are faceless, and when they're shielded by the sort of corporate pretense that protects any sense of real people being behind the scenes, it can lead to, as you say, a lot more scrutiny, because you're this like faceless organization. You're not real people, and actually often, Mistakes are just made by people, right, in one way or another. And being, I think when you see, you know, companies, I don't have any examples off the top of my head, but when you see CEOs of companies really coming out there, or leadership coming out there just being real about it, like the response is always so much better. The response is always way better received when it's real and authentic rather than sort of PR drafted sort of statements that feel inauthentic. And I think that's one thing that YouTubers and creators can really do well, right, is actually hold their hands up. And I think like JJ's a master at it. He's so good at knowing his own flaws and being willing to, when he makes a mistake, say, I made a mistake, I'm deeply sorry, and I'm going to change and move on for the better. That's the way to do it. It's not hiding and letting your team just do it for you. It's actually owning it and being real about it. And I think all the guys, if you see the response, I know it's obviously a long time ago now, it feels like a lifetime ago, but all the guys held their hands up. All the guys were in one way, shape or form behind what they said fully and, you know, really at the helm of that. And that, I think, again, is a really important part of it. It's just being, as you say, being authentic in your ups and being authentic in your downs.
In a slightly different vein, you guys faced a slight incident earlier this year around an ad to do with XIX Vodka brand. There was an ad included in a video in 2023, which the ASA then upheld a complaint around, saying that it wasn't identifiable as marketing communications. We've actually seen another similar ruling this week involving Stephen Bartlett and Huel, where he's a director. What did you learn from this episode, and how do you make sure it doesn't happen again?
Listen, I find the ASA really annoying. I'm going to be real. I think that you can even quote me on that. I think some of these rulings are insane. And the most insane one for me was the Grace Beverley one with Tala, and ours was a similar vein. I think they were totally stupid. And the people behind them really need to speak to people who are in well, there's two precedents that are super dangerous. The first thing is that if you're a business owner, are you therefore not allowed to talk about your business? What defines an ad? If you're a CEO, right, and you talk about your company, do you have to therefore disclose every time you talk about your company that it's an ad or not? Because that's not clear. What makes you an influencer? What makes you a creator? Does everybody has to abide by ASA rules, right? So if you are advertising your company indirectly or even directly, if you're, let's say, a CEO founder and you launch a new drink, do you have to say it's an ad? Because that's great. Because then how can you even begin to address the litany of breaking of the rules that have already taken place? If you're a bakery owner and you say, okay, here's my cake, you're advertising your business. My mother-in-law runs a bakery called Primrose Bakery. She's broken the ASA rule hundreds of times, clear, obviously, because she talks about her business. If you talk about your business, well, apparently now you have to say it's hashtag ad. So for me, the precedent's super dangerous. I think, of course, with brand deals, when it's a paid partnership, that makes sense. For your own brand, when it's yours, I think it is totally wrong. So I think for our one with you know, we our lawyers worked with the ASA on obviously you know, challenging some of there were three parts of the ruling that were challenged, and two of them were taken out because they were wrong. One being about advertising alcohol to a young audience, which wasn't the case, and we could prove that. And then the other one was, I can't remember what the other one was, to be honest. But then obviously the main one was about the disclosure. So for me, it's a really dangerous precedent. It's one that shouldn't be set. I think the Grace Beverley ruling was not good. It was a travesty actually for the space, and sets a terrible precedent that everyone will be breaking all the time, because you're not going to go to every single owner of every single business and stop them from talking about their business unless they put hashtag ad, which just for me is totally wrong. And I think surely they'll be able to see the logic in that, or maybe they're just too in deep that they have to back it and hold their ground, which I think would be wrong. But yeah, I'm dead against it. Now with the Stephen Bartlett ruling recently, I haven't looked into all the detail, but I think there was an ad for Zoe and ad for Huel. Slightly different when you're an investor potentially, and if there's deliverables attached to your investing. I think there is a grey area there. Like, I get that if it's somebody who's, let's say you're an advisor for a company, or you've got shares in a company and you're being paid through shares, or you know, you invest in a company and you're promoting it. I understand that there's slight nuance there, and I do think maybe, I don't know, I'm not going to comment on that with any definitive, like, this is wrong or this is right, because I haven't looked into it fully, but I can see that's a different grey area to it being your own business, and you founding the business and then promoting the business, if you're a bakery owner or if you're the Sidemen with their vodka brand. For me, there's a total difference there. So I'm not going to comment too much on the Stephen one. But with our one and with the Grace one, I think it was dead wrong personally. Although I don't know if that's a shared view, but yeah, I just can't logically see a way that makes sense.
It's a really interesting case, isn't it? I mean, you know, you could think of, let's say, Sidemen went on Graham Norton's show and started talking about their vodka brand or sides. No one would really say too much about that, because we sort of accept that when people go on Graham Norton, they're probably plugging something after, aren't they? It'd be like, you know, here's Tom Cruise, you're talking about the new Mission Impossible film.
Every
Clearly,
junket?
the success of Mission Impossible film, right? So it is a strange area, but it's really interesting to get your thoughts on it, definitely.
Yeah, and I'm happy to if anyone from the ASA for whatever reason is listening, I will happily talk to somebody and understand. I want to know like what is the logic behind it, because and how does that precedent manifest to small business? I was on the Small Business Council for the government, right? Helping with the SME Council under the last government, and I think I don't even know what's happened to it now, because obviously whenever there's change like this, it just throws everything out of the wall. But we're on pending, so maybe it'll come back. But the Small Business Council that we were on, like one of the things that you really understand is how strapped small businesses are in this country, and how many how much red tape and how many issues there are for SMEs dealing with inflation and all these other things. The last thing they need is to worry about ad declarations when they're talking as founders and CEOs of their own companies about their businesses. So I think we just need a little bit more balance on that one. I do though understand if you're being paid with sweat equity as a investor, or which I know obviously Stephen and others will be, they'll be being paid indirectly through equity in a business, or they're investing alongside sweat equity. There is a distinction there. Maybe there needs to be some more granularity. What are the rules if I'm an advisor for companies, I've been given sweat equity in companies? Do I need to declare if I talk about that company that it's an ad? Where does that line get drawn? If you run a fund, right? Let's say you're whoever, and you run Boulderson Capital or whatever fund it might be. Do you have to declare every time you go on Instagram and you share a company that you've invested in? Is that classified as an ad? Where does I just think it's nuts. People in this country, there's enough common sense for people to understand when things are actual advertisements that they have been paid cash for and when they are not. And I think as long as there's declarations on ads to a healthy enough degree, which I think the paid partnership tag and that tool does well. Paid partnership with X brand, cool. That for me, clear line. But you have to go into every little nook and cranny of promotion. I think there has to be a line somewhere, and I think it's gone way too far in my view. Because how do you even manage that? Like without investment, if you invested a certain amount, maybe not, or maybe if you've got a certain amount of equity, maybe not. Or if it's promoting it through maybe sharing about the product, but if it's just talking about the company, like it's just a minefield. I just think that we need to scrap in this country. To be honest, I think people can see through it, and most people, I don't know, but I'd imagine most people have common sense enough to see that it's a bit nuts.
Fascinating. Well, thank you so much for using that. Yeah, we'll no doubt pick it up with the ASA, and
Yeah, please. I'm happy to speak to them. I'm happy.
Moving on to more positive things. Who do you think is really nailing their partnerships right now when it comes to sort of influencers and brands working together? Are there any that really sort of stand out to you?
It's a hard one because I don't see, like, if I think about it off the top of my head, I don't see that many that are. I think interestingly, Revolut recently. So we work a lot with a company called After Party, who are an amazing production company that I love greatly, and they're run by it's founded by Calix, who's friend of the Sidemen, friend of ours here, and one of the directors, the sort of lead director, but also one of the partners in it, is a guy called Ben Doyle, who goes by the name of Rubber Duck, who's an amazing director. He recently did an ad for Revolut starring Munya Chihuahua that was so good, and I loved it because it was like Revolut working with talent, but giving talent and Ben creative freedom to create something that was really funny, and again in line with everything we're saying, it's TVC level, but for social. Like that probably hasn't gone on TV. It might have done, but even if it didn't, it wouldn't matter because you've got someone who's culturally relevant. You've executed it in a really fun and brilliant, creative way. It's glossy. It's like it's skit based. It's comedic. It's got all the tenets of something that's just going to pop off, and I think it was just perfect. So I think Revolut working with Ben is a great sign of that, and Munya thought it was really great work. Well, who else is killing? I think Amelia de Moldenberg, who I know well, and she's like brilliant, and somebody who I worked with for a number of years when I was at YMU and back in the day. Like she's someone who on a personal level and a professional level, I just am in awe of everything she's been able to achieve. And her production company, Dims Inc., is doing some great work with brands as well that I've seen. So check that out as well, because she's sort of doing a similar sort of model where she's, I think, executing creatively for brands whilst also starring. It's just the best blend. And when you're at that sort of level where you do drive conversion, you do drive numbers for brands just by your image and your style, it's worth packaging that in a sort of production company or creative execution model, which she did well. So yeah, I think she's killing it. Munya's killing it. I worked with Munya as well at YMU for a bit, and he's amazing for the same reason. So yeah, I think they're two good examples. I think it's few and far. It is genuinely few and far between on the talent side. I don't really. There's none. If I was to say, right, name a campaign that I love with somebody in it, I actually couldn't tell you off the top of my head. Which says maybe about me that I'm not looking enough, or that there aren't many out there, or a bit of both, which is probably more the case.
Yeah, well, I mean, there are so many going on at the moment, so I think it's excusable to sort of be focused on what you're doing. But it's good to get a few examples there. Yeah, appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean, it's been great to hear about everything that the Sidemen are up to, but I guess what we really want to know is sort of what's next for them in the next few years.
I'll split it into like brand and content. So on the brand level, it's about entrenching the businesses that we have and making sure that those businesses are developing in a substantial way on the ground. And that means that, you know, it's having great people around them who really understand the space, know what they're doing, and are pushing them forward, which we have. And that's great. And I think it's how do those scale out now, which is, yeah, it's been a great journey in all of those businesses, and looking forward to seeing where they can go, really. Then I think on the content side, it's about developing more formats and IP. It's about the boys being more efficient, I guess, with their time versus the shoots and, you know, the demands of family life and travel. That's going to have an impact on the type of videos they make and how they make them. So I think that's going to change potentially the type of Sidemen content that people see. Maybe it has to over time, in terms of, you know, are they going to be able to travel around the world in the same way? Probably not. When they're all, you know, a lot of them are getting married now, they're settling down, they're starting their families. That's going to have an impact on, just by definition, how much time they have to make bigger, longer productions in terms of, you know, traveling and all of that. But I think that's going to create more creativity, really. That always does when there's boundaries or restrictions. So I think there'll be different sorts of ideas coming through. There'll be you know, just, yeah, more. I think it's more creativity that is different, I think, is definitely the way forward, because it has to change based on their schedules. That's like the number one thing. And then I think it's about, yeah, formats and IP, working in more sort of traditional production as well. How do we work with the bigger partners? Like, we'd love to work with the Netflix or Amazons, etc., over time, and, you know, actually build out relationships with some of these guys on a deeper level, something that we're actively pursuing at the moment, because we see there's a big opportunity to bring all of our creativity to some of those platforms. So that's something that we're keen to do more of. And then, yeah, just building out the Sidemen brand, reaching more people around the world, developing connection around the world more deeply. And if we can do that, and ultimately, above all, as I always say, that our job is to make sure that the Sidemen have fun and they're enjoying what they do. If they're enjoying what they do, then everything else will work. So I think that's the number one thing, is how do we do all of this without all the boring stuff infringing on them? So we do all the boring stuff, we do all the operational, the strategic, the growth, the creative kind of business side, and they can focus on what they do best, which is being creatively brilliant and making great videos.
Fantastic. Well, we'll keep a close eye on it all, and you know, wish everyone all the best for what lies ahead. But very last question. I mentioned earlier on that you're working with Grayling, the PR agency, and the Media Relations Advisory Board. Just be good to know a bit about that, really. What made you want to get involved in that, and how do you see that role?
Totally. Well, yeah. I mean, I think, look, I've never worked in the world of PR, really. Like, I've worked with tons of PR agencies and amazing people in the space, but never worked fully within it. And for me, it's just about two things. One is you know, Grayling have an amazing set of clients, and they're incredibly robust and scaled and great as an agency. And I know that even from without having met them or sort of dug into the business. And then when I started digging into it, paired with them also coming to me and asking me if I wanted to be a part of it, it was a no-brainer to say, oh, actually, I can learn more about the space. I can learn about the clients and the needs of the clients, also learn how they operate. So I think for me, it's all about finding these sort of opportunities to learn in spaces that I don't currently know, because I just think there aren't many opportunities to do that. And how can I hopefully add value to their client base and to them, and to help them with all of the stuff that we're doing all day, every day on the sort of Sidemen and content side. So yeah, I think it'll be really fun. Like, I'm really looking forward to it. Great group of people on the board, and yeah, very grateful that they asked me.
Well, all the best for it. And unfortunately, that's all the time we've got. I feel we could talk for ages about this, and I really want to pick up on more, but that's all the time. And thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
No, thank you so much, guys. And looking forward to see. Well, if we ever want to do it again, more than happy to. If you need a part two. And yeah, thank you for having me on.
That would be brilliant. And thank you to everyone for listening. Until next time, goodbye.